You've just set yourself listening to the Critical Cast, a web-based audio program that discusses various elements of popular culture from the 80s to the present day with depth and comedy. Music, film, television, games, countdowns and critiques, reviews and retrospectives. Created by people with diverse taste, for people with diverse taste. This is the Critical Cast with your host, the Critical Android. Digital greetings and a warm analog welcome to you. This is the Critical Cast. I am the Critical Android, and joining me for this episode is the Innkeeper!
Oh, I don't know what you're doing, Android, but we'll figure it out.
The Innkeeper! I don't know. How do you...
I don't know.
We are actually talking today about horror video games, specifically 10 titles that we've selected, and what exactly makes them scary. But before we go into that, we'll talk about what's scary to you, Innkeeper. What defines like a horror experience to you?
I tend to prefer more of a realistic horror. Well, as realistic as certain horrors can be. Mainly suspense, that more of the anticipation that something is going to happen. I tend to prefer, I do enjoy horror movies myself as well, but I tend to prefer your more, and this sounds terrible, but your more realistic demonic, usually based on what would be loosely referred to as, say, Christian mythology, as well as, obviously, your typical ghosts, demons, those type of things. But it's not and I'm not a big fan of the blatant blood and gore for the sake of the blood and gore.
Right.
More of the psychological horror, if you would, as well.
And since we don't want to isolate people and insult any beliefs, if you believe in ghosts, demonology, anything like that, not casting a judgment, but other people obviously have their own beliefs. But you're saying, like, the idea of if you do believe in ghosts, demons, the Christian kind of embodiments of good and evil, the possibility of that playing havoc on individuals is a terrifying kind of horror experience. My mother was very much the same way. We actually did a episode on this channel of top 10 horror films, and Mom's idea of horror often came back to The Exorcist and things of that line.
And it goes back to my beliefs, and both my spiritual beliefs and my personal beliefs. So, I mean, that's kind of the way it sits.
I know that one of my brothers, who hasn't appeared on this podcast yet, but hopefully sometime, he had a ghost experience that I think I discussed in our Halloween special on the Critical Cast. And that changed his outlook on things tremendously, from the stance of like, all right, well, now that I've had this experience, what else is out there that I didn't necessarily give full credence to before? And that kind of opened a door that he can't fully close now. And I can understand where that comes from, that concept of like a mental door that is now open that you can't close it again.
Indeed. It's the old adage, what's seen cannot be unseen.
Exactly. Normally you try to shut certain thoughts away, but
no.
Sometimes that door gets slammed open. Yeah.
And you find that a lot of games try to feed upon that fear and those possibilities. One of my favorite horror game mechanics is the idea of sanity.
Yes.
Which shows up in a few different games, including some of the ones we'll talk about here today. Actually, 2 games basically push on the insanity. As you're dealing with stuff that you just don't believe or couldn't believe is real, it does mess with you. Different channels and different people have handled this, and you'll just see our take today.
Yeah, and for things that frighten me, like my stance has been kind of in, like you say, the realistic thing. But part of it is, like, for instance, for me, one of the scariest movies of all time was Outbreak, even though it wasn't intended to be a horror film. But the idea of global pandemic to me was more frightening than, say, a supernatural serial killer like Freddy or Jason or something like that.
I don't like those. They're just horror for the sake of horror. It's even Jason and Freddy and those types almost tend to be more comedic, than they do actual pure terror.
Or, for instance, also Unsolved Mysteries and Rescue 911, when those were television programs that were on.
Yeah.
When Robert Stack is telling you an actual murder that happened, and the killer's still out there, that's an instant lock the doors and windows. Thank you, Robert Stack, you asshole. And then with Rescue 911, kind of a similar thing, and just the idea of those accidents happening and seeing the results of them were frightening. So that was for what was scary for me, but for games, a lot of it goes back to what you say about the tension and the suspense. That games have a way of building that up in a way that film and television doesn't. Because there is no time, a certain runtime that has to be filled with the game. they can let things linger as long as the player is still active, and that's where that horror effect comes in.
Right. Making things unnerving. Myself being an anime fanatic, and I don't know, I know I've pushed it on you, but I don't know if you've actually watched the Eva series, even Neon Genesis Evangelion.
I haven't watched all of Eva yet.
There is a scene where there's music playing in the background. There's this big, basically, there is a scene where the main character is holding his best friend / also the antagonist, in this case, and they hold out the scene for a few minutes, and it becomes one of the most, and it's just a still shot, and it becomes one of the most unnerving scenes in the entire series.
Just the tension of it?
Yeah, but it's such an unnerving, and sometimes doing that in a game, and one game in particular definitely comes to mind, is a breed of those two combined.
We have several games here on the list.
Yeah.
We'll start off with one that the Innkeeper and I have a lot of fondness for. That we discovered this shortly after we started associating with each other and getting to know each other better, and it's a GameCube game called Eternal Darkness.
By far, and it's actually made a lot of top 10 lists for one of the best games on GameCube.
And for good reason, too, because it completely goes against what Nintendo was known for. And this game was, as the Innkeeper stated, was for the GameCube. It was developed by Silicon Knights, which, unfortunately, they're no longer a company. They've had a lot of struggles in terms of internal issues, lawsuits, canceled projects, and eventually everything just came out to kind of kill any progress that they had on things, and they've gone under. But Silicon Knights developed this back in 2002. It got released for the GameCube. And it basically has a very interesting plot that goes chapter by chapter over the history of Alexandra Roivas and the family that she has, ancestors, and people who interacted with her ancestors, about this book that is actually made of like human skin and eyes. It's creepy.
The Necronomicon?
Kind of. It's their version of the Necronomicon.
Exactly, yeah. It's a very interesting game. It's in the old Resident Evil style type of shooter, zombie shooter. And it has one mechanic that is by far one of the first to do it, which is the sanity meter.
What ends up happening is that every interaction that you have with one of these abominations, because they're not just zombies, some of these are just like eldritch abominations.
Yes.
And witnessing them makes your character go slightly more insane each time. You do get to restore some of your sanity by killing these things completely. Because this game takes place over a span of history ranging from, according to our timeline here, ancient Rome all the way up to present day.
Yes.
So we go from, at the time, the present day was considered 2000. It starts off in 26 BC. So you don't use guns. A lot of the weapons that you have through most of it are swords.
Yeah. I mean, it's just basic. I mean, I believe there's an Indiana Jones character or style character somewhere in the middle of there, too.
Yes.
There's a lot of different things, or a lot of different characters, but, it's the sanity whole setup. And it's not the normal, okay, something bad happens to my character. No, it messes with you.
Yeah, the game completely breaks the fourth wall to do things like pretending to erase your memory card, putting up a screen that says, thank you for playing, stay tuned for Eternal Darkness 2.
Which, oddly enough, people brought it back bitching to places like GameStop and things like that, and the GameStop employees were laughing.
Yeah.
Because this was happening. People were getting obscenely irritated and mad when they didn't realize that's what was going on.
Yep. And then there'd be things like it would adjust the audio, the tint on your TV.
Invert controls.
Yep. And granted, none of the TV effects were actually altering the real tint or whatnot. The game was just altering itself and making it look that way. But then there'd be other things, too, that would kind of mess with you because you could walk into a room and all of a sudden you have no ammo.
Yeah.
And it's like, what happened? Where's all my ammunition? Or your character would just explode. Like, take a couple steps and all of a sudden the top half of your character just blows up.
Oh, I like the one where it splits in half. And the top half goes one direction, the bottom half goes another.
A lot of great sanity effects that came into play. Mm-hmm. But this game, without name-dropping it, follows along with the whole idea of the Cthulhu mythos.
Yes.
Because the whole concept of Cthulhu, as H.P. Lovecraft described the entity, was that it was beyond human comprehension, so that just gazing upon it would cause insanity. And that's what happens here. And even though killing enemies will restore some of your sanity, it never restores quite as much as you lost. So your character will still go insane over the course of time.
If I remember correctly, wasn't the final boss like a big blob-looking thing or something?
What ends up happening is that there's 3 like Eldritch Abomination gods of sorts that are trying to take control of Earth. And there's a 4th one called, I think, Montarock or something, that you find out is pulling the strings the entire time and basically creating a time loop that sends your character back through time multiple times, effectively eliminating all the gods.
Yeah.
Because even though your character could be set back in time, the gods existed beyond time, so that if they were eliminated from all possible timelines, leaving Montarock as the only living god.
It's been a while since I've played, so...
It's been a long time since I played it through as well, but I had to refresh myself on it just for the sake of this. And it's still a very, very good game. It controls a little clunky compared to modern-day gaming, but it's still very good, and we both act... Oh, one of the fun things about it is the active targeting system that it would have, where by holding down one of the trigger buttons and using the control stick, you could aim to attack a certain body part of the enemies.
I forgot about that. Yep, you're correct.
So if you want to lob off an arm using like the scimitar that you picked up, lob off the arm. So it made for a very interesting game, and they purposely gave some of the strongest weaponry to the weakest character. There's one character who gets like an elephant gun rifle and several other large pieces of weaponry, but he's a very weak character overall, and they found that to be an interesting kind of dichotomy about giving a character who's physically very weak all of the most powerful weapons in the game.
It kind of makes sense. It's a balanced situation.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. So Eternal Darkness makes our list. As for why it's scary, because it really does capture that feeling of messing with the player and breaking that fourth wall to make you as a person feel unsettled.
And it does it very well. Especially for that generation.
Oh yeah, for being a GameCube game, it was not something that people really understood very well. And speaking of kind of like the Eldritch Abominations and things like that, Amnesia for the PC, is another one.
That's the one I was going to bring up. Yeah, it does a lot of the similar things. I haven't played it through all the way, actually.
It's very hard to play all the way through because of how terrifying it is.
Yeah, there's a few issues that I've had with it. One of which is kind of direction. That was one of my biggest issues, is which direction you go to next. It's the biggest... With that game, it's the unseen. You know something's coming, but you don't know what it is, you don't know where it is, you don't know when it's going to show up. You just know it's there.
Yeah, and this game came out in 2010.
Yeah, an indie game at that.
Yeah, it was an independently released title back in 2010 for Microsoft, Windows, and a couple other platforms. The thing that makes this frightening, the way the insanity meter functions, has to do with being in the dark and in the light.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. If you're in the dark, your character is feeling more alone and scared, and it starts to wear on them because you don't know what's in the darkness. If you're in the light, it helps you because you can see what's happening, but the problem is that while you're in the light, other things can also see you. And that's the trade-off that the game is constantly pitting you against. Your character losing their sanity from being in the dark, but you're technically physically safer there, but you feel safer in the light, and that dichotomy is constantly working either for you or against you, depending on what you're doing.
Which also is part of human nature, too.
Yeah.
Humanity and other animals actually feel quite uncomfortable in the dark, as opposed to the light.
Yeah, so it ties in that kind of whole predator-prey kind of relationship that people experience, as you mentioned.
Indeed.
There is a nice little like lean mechanic, too, in this game.
Yes.
Which is not something that happens a lot in these first-person type games. And it's another thing I feel like this did well that other games don't do to that level. Just still, stay away from these monsters in Amnesia. They're terrible. Absolutely terrifying. For another one that kind of plays upon that sanity, there's the game Bloodborne, which was a PS4 game that was made by the same people who made the Dark Souls series of games. And that's From Software. Bloodborne was released back in 2015, so it's the most recent game on this list, I believe. And the thing that makes this so terrifying is that even though it's an action game, it's not supposed to be kind of a horror title, the way that the setting is established is kind of like almost a Victorian era kind of feel to it, even though it's not taking place on any Earth we know. But there's a constant threat of death and danger around every corner. The enemies are terrifying. And the really interesting part about this game that most people don't realize until they really get into it, where you pick up these items called Madman's Insight. And the more you get of them, the more options you have available for purchasing things from certain shops, and you can trade them in. But the more you stockpile them, the worse the world appears to be. What ends up happening is that the whole plot of the game, spoiler alert, isn't just about monsters. It's about these alien life forms that kind of call back to the whole Cthulhu thing, that have invaded and taken over and have been infesting and inhabiting society for millennia as kind of like the new gods of sorts. And they've always been there, but they don't exist on a realm that people can see. The only people who can see them are the ones who are slightly more off, like mentally. They're able to see past the facade that they put up. And so the more of these things you gain, the more you see like these terrifying monsters in the background. Not that they actually like fight or challenge you sometimes, but they exist. And now the more Madman's Insight you collect, the more of them you can see. And you realize how much more twisted this world is than first appeared.
It's interesting, too, you say that. Lovecraftian horror has kind of come to the forefront in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
It's kind of hit into the geek nerd culture as being kind of one of those big items that everybody tends to gravitate to. Why, I'm not really quite sure myself. I'm not a huge fan of Lovecraft personally, but I can appreciate it, I guess I could say.
I like the idea of something so terrifying or beyond the scope of human intelligence that it drives a person insane trying to figure it out.
Okay, I can give you that part, yes.
I think a lot of it has to do with the writer as well. Because depending on how a person's interpreting it and using it, like the whole idea of the Cthulhu monster itself, this Kraken kind of sea demon thing. Yeah, I could do less of it. But the idea of something that is so formless and powerful that it drives a person insane, that actually kind of gives that's something that Stephen King touched upon with It.
Yes, actually, that's a good reference.
Yeah, I don't know if most people realize this, but It, Pennywise, is not a clown.
No.
This is just the form that it takes to instill fear and draw that fear out. It's really more of a formless entity known as the Deadlights. And gazing upon it in its true form is either deadly, because a person just, it obliterates their brain, or it leaves them catatonic from the stunned appearance of it. They just can't handle it.
Anywho, continuing on.
Yeah, speaking of psychological trauma.
Yeah.
Alien Isolation.
Haven't played.
But you are familiar, at least, with...
I'm familiar with Aliens, and I'm familiar with some of the Alien games, the earlier versions. And yeah, they're pretty unnerving. Not knowing where it's going to drop out of is probably one of the scarier and more frightening things to play.
How many of the Alien movies have you seen?
All except for, I think, the last one. The most, well, it's not technically an Alien movie, but
Prometheus,
Prometheus I haven't seen.
Okay.
I've seen all the other ones, yeah.
So,
and Aliens is pretty damn frightening to begin with anyways.
It is. Now, which do you prefer? Do you prefer Ridley Scott's Alien or James Cameron Aliens?
The original.
All right, I agree. Mostly because I feel the suspense and thriller elements of that, to me, are more fun and intoxicating in a way than the overall, like, overblown action of Aliens. Mm-hmm. Even though I can respect it for an action movie, but I think
But that's not what the genre needs to be about. I mean, that was the whole thing with Aliens, or Alien, was the fact that you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
And that's more horror than anything else.
Yeah, and that's what Alien Isolation does so well. This is another more recent game, not as recent as Bloodborne was, but still fairly recent. It was released for the Xbox 360, PS3, PS4, and Xbox One.
And I believe it actually has been adapted by some people for VR, and apparently it's straight out terrifying.
I wouldn't in VR. Because when it came out in 2014, this was coming hot off the heels of a very bad Alien game, Aliens Colonial Marines.
Yes, oh.
But Isolation went into more of an adventure territory. But because of the way it tried to stick to the first movie, it played up a lot of those horror elements of you're alone, it's one alien trying to attack you and stalk you for this entire time. You don't have much in the way of a defense or offensive capabilities. What can you do to try to stop this thing and survive? Mm-hmm. And when you give the character a sense of hopelessness like that, it draws out the horror and the survival elements of it because of all those things. So that's why the game is as impactful as it is, because it does give you that feeling of desperation constantly. Mm-hmm. And that's similar to how the movie played out, too. They were defenseless against this creature.
Yeah.
And even if they could injure it, the blood, being acidic, ate through the goddamn ship.
Yeah, so you're in trouble. No matter what it is, you're lunch.
That or just, well, I guess a vessel for the babies, as John Hurt found out.
I bet you that hurt.
He did. He was the only person that they told about what was going to happen, too, in that scene.
Yeah.
Everybody else had no idea what the hell they were expecting.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, Ridley Scott, as the director, said, okay, John, here's what's going to happen. You're the only person who knows about this. Everybody else just has a scene that says, walk into room and react.
and it plays out perfectly in that scene.
Yeah, all those reactions in Alien are genuine.
Nice.
It's what they call enforced method acting. So, nice little Alien trivia bit in there for people, too.
Yeah.
Why does the screen just say, enter room and react? Oh, you'll see.
I'm sure he was just smiling, going, come, my pretties, come. Dance for me. Dance. And they did. Oh, did they?
Speaking of VR, though.
Yes.
Don't let go.
Don't let go. And obviously, from our previous podcast, as you guys know, I'm a VR head. I'm big into it. Don't Let Go is a psychological horror game. Now, there's other horror games out for VR, quite a few right now. Don't Let Go is one of the first. It's been expanded on a bit. It actually showed up in one of the first development kits for the Oculus Rift, the DK1. And it was a little independent creation where literally the whole goal of the game is you put your hand on control, on left control and right control, and don't let go. Sounds easy, right? Well, what they do in VR is have different things happen. First, you have flies buzzing around your head. Okay, that can get a little annoying. Then they have spiders crawling around, including on what appears to be your hands. They'll have a velociraptor come in. I'm missing things, because there's more than that. The final shot, basically you win the game if you can deal with a spider coming head first into your face. They re-released it again recently on Steam VR and added an additional one, which you're basically in like a desert canyon, and there's a bird coming and pecking at you, eagle coming and pecking at you, there's scorpions, and all the like going on. And it's basically a non-reaction game. They don't want you to react, and some people can do it. Other people, and actually if you look on YouTube, you can find reaction videos for people playing this game. And some of it's hysterical. Actually, since we're talking VR, and it's a game, I guess we could put it on this list. I apologize, I can't remember the name, but on PlayStation VR, they had a shark diving simulation, which they put you in the cage, you go down, and of course, systems fail, you get locked, and the shark attacks you.
The Deep,
yes. There are quite a few reaction videos regarding this game as well. But it's that taking that, and especially you being stuck in a cage, in one of those shark cages, it gives you that, basically that, almost that claustrophobia and that hopelessness of being stuck in one place and not being able to move. Similar to Don't Let Go, like I was talking about. You can't let go, you've got to stay in that spot.
So I also see it listed as Shark Encounter gameplay. It's on PlayStation VR Worlds, which is kind of their kind of compilation of sorts of different things.
Yeah, their demo, if you would.
Yeah. Kind of like it is to the VR what Wii Sports was to the Wii, and you can find it on there if you're interested in seeing what it's capable of.
But like I've said, I've seen some reaction videos. It looks pretty interesting.
We're not going to fully transition out of VR because there's another game here that I'm sure if it hasn't been patched for VR yet, it's got to be coming down the pipeline here.
What's that?
Five Nights at Freddy's.
I think they're working on some. There's a lot of the thing with Five Nights at Freddy's is there's so much fan-made stuff.
Yes,
I wouldn't be surprised if there's a VR patch out there. I haven't looked personally yet, but at some point I will. But Five Nights at Freddy's, and that's one of those. It's not as much the jump scares, the horror of the game itself. It's the tension.
Yes,
I have X amount of time to keep up with XYZ and make sure that I don't get chopped. And it's not the imagery, I guess it is the jump scares, but it's that tension of trying to stay on top of all these things.
Yes, it's the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise started off in 2014, with the basic premise of if you were a security guard at a Chuck E. Cheese type restaurant and the animatronics
were evil?
Were evil, came to life, and were trying to attack you. In order
pizza.
But pizza, yes.
Pizza!
You're the pizza this time.
I don't have pepperoni.
Well, to them you do. The whole idea is
Although you tend to be a bit cheesy.
With a cheesy joke. Great, yeah. Proving your point there. Point is here. They come to attack you, and there's the only things you can really do are monitor them on the cameras, check to the left and the right, to the doors of the room that you're in to see if they're approaching, and try to shut those doors using a electrical lock to try to stop them. As you point out, you're doing A, B, C, and D to monitor them and stay on top of things. Your power's dwindling, you're trying to keep track of time to make sure you make it to the end, you're trying to look at the cameras to see where they are, and in doing all of this, you get fixed into this sort of trance of a tunnel vision, like I gotta do this, this, and this, and your mind just gets worked into it. So when those jump scares happen, they are jolting you out of a preset conditioning that you've put yourself into, which makes it all the more frightening when it does happen, because you're not expecting it anymore. We could get into the lore of this game, which is fascinating in itself.
Which is even more darker than most games tend to be, even horror games.
Yes.
The lore tends to be so much more darker, and if you are one of the people like myself who actually dived into the book, which, debatable if that's a good thing or not, I have, it's interesting, but the lore itself is one of the darkest things you'll come across, even with the most recent edition being Sister Location. And Sister Location is even more creepy.
From the voice acting that they incorporated into it, the overall kind of narrative that it constructs. The creator, Scott Cawthon, has done a strong job at kind of patching things together to make something that just seemed like a one-off kind of jump scare fest turn into something more story-driven.
Fleshed out.
And fleshed out to the point where it creates strong conversations online and has really helped the careers of several YouTubers out there.
Indeed. It really has. But it's one of those things, he contradicts himself a lot, Scott Kaufman does, with the gameplay and things like that. But it still makes it even more interesting because you have these theorists, if you would, trying to figure out Five Nights lore, and it's driving them crazy.
Yes, it is.
The more you dive into it, the more depressing and the more creepy it gets, which makes me wonder what type of man Scott is.
Apparently a pretty devout Christian.
Oh, that's what he used to do.
Yeah, he used to make Christian games until he was criticized for the art direction and how terrible these characters looked, and they were criticized as being like creepy animatronics. And he said to himself, well, if you think that's creepy, I think I can do better than that.
And oh my god, did he.
Yeah. So more power to him for taking criticism and turning it into
a gold mine?
Yeah.
He literally did. the fact that there's even merchandise these days is a testament. Merchandise for an indie game. Who would have thought?
Hey, it happens. I mean, look at Minecraft and what that's done.
True.
But I do like the idea of them making an amusement park kind of version of it, like they're working on right now. Because that would be a legitimately terrifying experience.
He's making it's Scott Kaufman or somebody else?
It's contracted out to actually make an actual Fazbear's Pizza establishment amusement park. Like scary trip thing. You can't see the Innkeeper's face. I know it's kind of like tempting fate for something terrible to happen. It's like it's like if you built a fictional Jurassic Park and then the robot dinosaurs escaped.
Last I heard, they were doing a movie.
They are working on a movie, but it's actually been licensed for the use of an actual theme park attraction.
We need to take a trip.
It could be worth it.
Why do you break me almost every cast or every other cast?
I don't know.
I'm just trying to fathom this. I kind of want to see it.
I think it would be a lot of scary fun. Mm-hmm. Absolutely terrifying, but a lot of fun. One of the things that makes horror effective is if you can take something that is an everyday thing or something we commonly associate with everyday life and suddenly make it scary. And that's something that makes these animatronics as frightening as they are because they even look off. Yeah. Like the costumes, there's just something about it even in real life to where it's not right. There's something slightly off about it that's touching on the fabric of reality, but also isn't quite real. And when that happens, it's off-putting.
Well, there are some children who are scared by animatronics.
For good reason.
And that's just another breeding on primal fears as well. I mean, just like there are children who are scared to death of the Disney costumes.
Oh yeah, I can understand that.
Disneyland.
Well, because the other thing is too that let's say you see the cartoons as a kid.
Yeah,
the cartoons aren't scaring you, but then seeing a real life depiction of that character, it doesn't look quite right to you. That's why, like, early CGI can look frightening or just off-putting.
Yes,
because it has that what they call it the uncanny valley that it sinks into, where it doesn't look like it should.
Yeah. It's unnerving. And that's like even my discussions on VR and whatnot. People get sick because while everything everything you look at looks fine and everything seems to be synced, your eyes and your brain doesn't pick up that things are not right, that they're off.
Right.
And it's that almost that reptilian brain. And same thing with horror. It's that reptilian brain that goes, time to run.
Yeah. Bye. Another good example of this is there's the old folklore stories mostly associated with like Native Americans about the skinwalkers.
Ooh.
Like these things that can apparently take on the appearance or the guise of another animal or person. But in the myths, there's always the common themes that these skinwalkers are not perfect mimics. There's always one trait or something that they get wrong.
Right. Yep.
And because of that, again, it speaks to that part of your brain that says something is not quite right here. And like you say, that has a trigger in the back of your mind that kind of just alerts you that something is wrong. And again, that's where it pertains to things like animatronics or clowns even. I think that's part of it too, where the smile you can tell is not real.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you take associations too. You look at the front of a car and you see like a smile. The body,
yes.
The human mind has that association. So when there's something that doesn't fit in that association, it's unnerving.
See, look at this. We're doing insightful analysis of the human mind in horror. We'll branch away from more of the realistic horror and dive back into the supernatural here with Fatal Frame.
Ah, yes, Fatal Frame.
Now, as you can attest to, the Japanese do horror in a way that most American audiences hadn't been exposed to up until when The Ring came out.
I love The Ring.
For those Ringu. For those who aren't familiar, The Ring, that famous 7 Days movie that's actually getting a reboot.
They are?
Yeah, they're making a new Ring movie.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't know either. But the whole concept of it is that there was a videotape that somebody would watch in which a kind of like a ghostly entity would appear on it along with a lot of other weird kind of random images, and then the person who viewed it would get a phone call that said 7 days. And that person would mysteriously die in 7 days.
I will tell you, my roommate in college, we watched that one night. For the next week and a half, his bedroom TV was in the living room because he'd have a TV in the same room with him when he slept. And we're talking a 25-year-old individual, 25-year-old guy.
It's like that scene at the end of Poltergeist where they put the TV outside the motel room.
Yeah. Like, he freaked, and he literally could not be anywhere near a TV at night because it freaked him out.
The Japanese, the way that they approach horror with some of the plots and some of the cinematography, the elements to it, came through with Ringu and The Ring.
Yes.
But they're also very much a part of Fatal Frame and Fatal Frame 2. The second one's considered more frightening. One of the reasons why this game is as scary as it is, you are stuck in like this haunted mansion, essentially, or going through it. The only way you can defeat these ghosts that attack you is through a spirit camera that you acquire that can actually trap and seal away the spirits of these ghosts. So you have to actually take pictures of them using this camera and the special like spirit film that they have.
It's like Ghostbusters.
Kind of like Ghostbusters with cameras. But what happens is, because you have to look through the viewfinder of the camera to see them, the game goes from a third-person perspective to a first-person perspective very quickly. When you're looking through a viewfinder, your view not only gets focused, but the peripheral vision gets completely removed. That allows things to sneak up on you much more effectively, appear like almost seemingly from out of nowhere, and it also forces you to look at what it is you're trying to ideally run from. But now you can't. And you have to stare that fear directly in the face. And I think that's what makes Fatal Frame work as strongly as it does, in forcing you to confront things and confine your field of view.
And they actually did the only good use, at least in my opinion, of the, or innovative use of the Wii U system, of the Wii U's touchpad system, by using that as the camera, was by far the only ingenious use of that system that I saw.
I think that's a very good way of putting that.
A lot of people didn't like the tablet, including myself, I won't lie.
I like the tablet. The only reason I like the tablet is for the purpose of off-screen play. So if I wanted to watch something on YouTube that didn't require a lot of direct vision, I could play something on the tablet while watching that.
Yeah, but, I mean, I have my Kindle Fire sitting right here. I can do the same.
Not everybody is you, Innkeeper!
What do you have in your hand?
I have a Kindle Fire in my hand.
But, I mean, you do have that usefulness. You have the little things. They do the little gimmicks with, what is it, one of the Mario games? They do the gimmick with you can create blocks or something. Or
yeah, you can draw in different items on the tablet.
Yeah, I mean, that was by far one of the most innovative use of the Wii U tablet.
Yeah, the idea of actually using it as a camera. A fake camera. Going along with this we'll hop back to an American developer here and focus on the title Fear.
Oh, yes, Fear. I'll admit I haven't played all the way through this, but I have played Fear. Definitely another psychological style game. The main antagonist, you play as a member of like a, how would I put it, like a
specialized task force of
paranormal
sorts?
Task force, yeah. At some points they had created basically a superhuman.
This game was originally released for Windows back in 2005, I'll add.
Right. I picked it up during Halloween as part of the one of Steam sales. I started playing a bit of it, but I did put it back down. And I've played, I think, Fear 3 as well, prior as well. Not getting full the way through. It is one of those things, it plays on the whole envision. You're seeing one thing that's not really there. It's there, but it's not there. This ghostly image, which you'll find is Alma, which is the main antagonist. It has telepathic abilities, among other things.
Yep.
Is stalking you, and you're trying to stalk her at one point because she's the one causing all the issues. The game can be very unnerving because things are there that shouldn't be there.
It's also apparently very heavily inspired by Japanese horror. The developers took a lot of insights from
it is very much. It's got that old Japanese horror. And what is it with little girls? For some reason, little girls, especially acting in unnatural ways, tends to mess with people's psyche as well. You find it in many movies and many games.
Yeah, it's kind of
the
like
Children of the Corn kind of setup.
I was about to say something like the Children of the Corn. I think it goes back to that idea of when you think of children as innocent, and not only is that innocence not there, but it's replaced by something evil and malicious, it goes back to that kind of unnerving, unanticipated, this isn't right kind of a thing. Like I said, it triggers in the head something completely different than the reaction you're supposed to see about a potentially helpless child.
Yeah, I'll admit, my daughter did that one night where she crawls in to my bed, sits at the end of my bed, and kind of just stares and looks like, "Hi, Daddy."
Go back to your room, go back to your room, go back to your room.
She meant nothing by it.
Just show her the ring sometimes, like, this is what you were looking like!
It really was.
Why did you do this to me?
But yeah, there's something unnerving about that, and Alma is very young in the first Fear, and she does have the appearance of the girl from the well from The Ring. So again, it makes it very unnerving. Especially when anytime she shows up, there's usually lots of blood involved.
There's also that idea of the emotional distance and detachment that's not there in the character.
Yes.
That kind of dead inside.
And that's pretty much the gist of that character anyways. I mean, I'll have to do a full playthrough and a review later on.
To compare it to another female antagonist, Shodan from System Shock and System Shock 2. That cold, metallic voice that has no emotion, no feel to it. It's the exact same kind of feeling that I get that kind of creeps me out. If I'm driving along at like 2 o'clock in the morning and a national weather alert or something comes on and, you know, goes from the beeping to that very dead voice that's not quite right.
Yeah.
So, the National Weather Service in Binghamton has issued an apocalypse warning for the world. That hasn't happened yet.
Not yet.
Be on the lookout for lightning, thunder, flaming hail, and the 4 horsemen. If you see them approaching, do not go near them. Stay away from all windows. But fear is, as you mentioned, one of the reasons that makes it frightening is that is Alma's presence.
It is Alma's. Well, that's pretty much the gist of the entire game, is Alma's presence.
Since, again, that was inspired by Japanese horror, one of the big Japanese horror franchises in gaming has been Resident Evil.
Indeed.
Since it premiered in 96. Mm-hmm. And even then, that was inspired by an older series and an older Japanese horror movie called Sweet Home. And it was a 1989 survival horror game that was originally released for just the Famicom, the family computer. But it's based off of a movie, and as you can see from one of the screenshots here, looks kind of like an RPG in terms of the menu system. But it plays out in a way of, okay, if your characters die, they die, and you've got to kind of keep going through.
It kind of reminds me of one of the worst games for original NES.
Which one?
There was another horror game.
The Uninvited?
For the original NES?
Uninvited was made for the original NES.
Okay. I'm thinking of one of the worst games for the NES. Friday the 13th.
Oh, that was terrible.
I actually own a copy of that, oddly enough.
Of course you do.
Yeah, it was bought for me as a kid.
Yes.
Makes me wonder what my parents would think.
Yeah, well...
And that was actually an unnerving game, because you had a time frame, you never knew where the hell he was coming from.
Yep, you never knew where Jason was coming from.
It actually, I played it quite a bit, but it was definitely an unnerving game. It's funny thinking about something that far back as being a frightening game.
It is weird. And, again, that's why Sweet Home for the Famicom is so weird in that, because they were trying to do horror on a system that had so many limited features to it that all they could rely on, you really had to work for the horror. And I think that's where it becomes more effective on a level, because when you have less to work with, you try to make the most of what you have.
Yeah. Friday the 13th was a terrible game. It was hard to play. The map was confusing as can be.
Yeah, the mechanics weren't very well explained.
But it was an unnerving game. And I actually, for some reason, finally have an appreciation for that game.
Maybe we'll have to load it up sometime and just see what happens.
I've got the original card.
There you go. But Resident Evil, drawing from the kind of old school like horror from the NES and Sweet Home, forces resource management along with zombies. And part of the horror from this game comes not only from the whole, you don't know what to expect with zombies, but you know that you have limited resources. And when you have that at your disposal, it triggers a fight or flight response, but you're also very nervous to fight because you know it's going to leave you very much open for potential problems. Mm-hmm. And this is where Resident Evil 2 really captured a lot of that, because you went from the mansion house of the first game to the police headquarters, and things got really wild really fast in a lot of those areas.
Yes, it does. And I have the pure pleasure of playing it on a system that most people didn't.
Yes, the N64.
That's correct. I got that, the N64 cart, which was a very difficult thing for them to do, because they had to do a ton of compression, both for video and audio on it, and they pulled it off. Now, the one thing you'll notice about as far as the difference between myself and the Android is I'm a PC player primarily, but I also do Nintendo for the most part, up until the Wii. After the Wii, I kind of went off consoles altogether and went to PC. So most of my experience in gaming is old school Nintendo or PC. And having Resident Evil 2 was a joy to get for the N64, because it was a game that I could never play otherwise. And I'll tell you what, I bought it, got home, started playing it, and I worked as a bartender back then. So I got home about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and started playing it, and was too afraid to go to sleep.
I can understand that feeling completely. It's still a creepy game to this day.
Yeah.
Like when the liquor comes through the window.
Yes, the liquor. Oh my god. That was actually one of the most memorable parts of that game.
And they get so many things right, too, with it, where not only will something burst through, but then the music cues are there, the sound cues are there. It does so many things right to create that atmosphere. And that's where a lot of people have criticized the Resident Evil franchise for going off the rails now, because of more focus on action and less on atmosphere. 2 nailed the combination of everything, and was able to capture it in a really engrossing manner that has made it very hard to top in terms of the horror aspect of things.
And the funny thing, too, is I hate the controls. I don't like the original Resident Evil style controls, but I played through it because I loved the game. Same thing with Eternal Darkness. Same control setup, don't like it, but the game was so enjoyable, I pushed through it because of how good the game was.
And the reason for the controls partly is because when the original Resident Evil was made in 96, movement in a 3D environment had not been done an awful lot in gaming.
No, it hadn't.
So there was a lot of confusion about how to do it effectively for the player. On top of that, because it's so clunky, the controlling, it makes it harder to survive and increases the tension even more so because your characters are so cumbersome to control. So it does also add to the experience because it handles so poorly. The Silent Hill franchise also did that an awful lot.
Yes, they did.
Instead of going the straight-up zombie route, they go with a much more complex storyline of the presence of demons and angels on Earth, cults, and a lot of other imagery that is very disturbing. Silent Hill 2 really captured that, because the whole concept of Silent Hill, I guess, was that a cult summoned a demonic entity to that area. And in order to fight it, Metatron, the voice of God, not Alan Rickman from Dogma, but the actual Christian mythology Metatron, came down, descended on there to fight it. The impact of that battle left that area in a kind of like a limbo state between heaven and hell that presented itself differently to people depending on the darkness or the light of their soul.
Interesting.
So for a lot of people approaching Silent Hill, it was a beautiful, idyllic paradise. For others, it was this kind of foggy mess of snow and fog, with things that seemed normal, but then a demonic presence that would come out of nowhere, like these monsters. And then for some, it was just complete hell dimension. And in Silent Hill 2 specifically, James Sunderland is a character that goes in there and finds it in this foggy mess. And it keeps slipping into this hell dimension void. The reason we find out, he goes to Silent Hill because he seemingly gets a letter from his wife saying to meet him in Silent Hill. And he goes there because his wife is dead, so he doesn't know how she could be sending him this thing. And so he goes and he finds this really weird landscape. The thing that makes it so unique is that we find out that everything from Silent Hill that's attacking him and that he's seeing are manifestations of his psyche. And the reason why his psyche is coming out now to attack him is because of what happened with his wife. Spoiler alert. So, mute this for a minute or two if you don't want to hear this. What had happened to James's wife is that she had cancer and was suffering for a long period of time. So much so that he couldn't handle the pressure of it anymore and killed her.
Okay.
Without her permission. She didn't ask for like a mercy kill. He couldn't handle it anymore, so decided to put his wife out of her misery, but without talking to her about it. That's why this Silent Hill is a murky mess of everything, because he's not necessarily a bad person. He just cracked under the pressure of what his wife was going through and her imminent death, couldn't handle it anymore, and so now all these things that you see, there's like his pyramid head, this massive figure that has become attached to the series, is part of a manifestation of his desire to be punished, because he knows he did wrong and he wants to suffer for what he did, and that's where Pyramid Head comes from. These nurses, dressed in like very skimpy gowns and whatnot, represents his sexual desire that he was having for other women, specifically healthcare workers, who were helping take care of his wife at the time. So everything comes back around what had happened. And the psychological horror element of that game is something that Resident Evil never got. And that's why Silent Hill 2 is called by many to be one of the best horror games of all time.
It really is. I mean, I haven't played, but I know a bit about it, to say that it literally is considered one of the best, or should be considered one of the best of all created.
One of your favorite gaming critics considers it to be one of the finest games of all time. Yahtzee. If you go to Zero Punctuation and watch the Yahtzee video on it, he just raves about the game, of why Silent Hill 2 is so good. And he's 100% correct on as to why it is.
He also raves about one of my personal favorite horror games, which we've already talked about.
Amnesia?
No.
Oh, Eternal Darkness. He also loved Amnesia as well.
Yes, he did.
He called it a constipation relief.
He's really an interesting reviewer. I don't think we need to go into a full thing, but yeah, because he doesn't hold any punches whatsoever.
No, he doesn't. He's very cynical about games and the way that he views them, but when it comes to ones that he likes, he tells you exactly why they work, and he's 100% correct. And then, to draw from Silent Hill as we draw to a close here, PT, playable trailer.
That was messed up, man.
Yeah, this was supposed to be a Silent Hill game that got canceled by Konami. But before it did, it gave us PT, a demo that you could play on the PlayStation Network.
Are you sure that wasn't PTSD?
It turned into that, I'll tell you what. But the whole concept behind it is you get this very kind of odd trailer where you're just walking through a house, just a seemingly normal house, but you start making loops around the house. Like, it teleports you back to where you came from. And things start deteriorating more and more and more. So this plays off of what we'd already said about things not seeming right. It creates a strong atmosphere. And then you get the radio. And the radio playing and the things that it says are truly creepy. So it captures a lot of all those things. And it also has a bathroom in it.
Oh, of course, the bathroom. Yes, you and your bathroom.
And there's a psychological representations of things because there's a fetus in the sink that's talking. And it's really creepy. Things appear in the bathroom mirror, potentially, out the windows. Scary as all hell.
It's really, by far, one of the most messed up games. Outlast was the game I was thinking about.
Oh, yes, sir. Outlast in the sanitarium.
Yeah. That's crazy on a whole different level.
Yes, it is. Crazy sanitarium. I see what you did.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, we left out, with the exception of, Resident Evil, I think we left out a lot of, zombie games. Zombies, unfortunately, have kind of...
They've been so overdone.
It has. And it's a shame because, even certain games like the Left 4 Dead series, good series, fun game to play, but everything has just been pushed. Killing Floor, all these other... What's the one with they film on a mall and it's just...
Dead Rising.
Dead Rising, another example. Especially with Walking Dead and all those types of things. Zombies are the new vampires.
Yeah, it's a way of putting it. Well, you had the vampire surge after Twilight and everything.
Vampires don't sparkle.
But they gain in popularity, and then you had the rise of the zombies because of The Walking Dead. And it just gets to the point where, okay, this is no longer scary. But horror has done that for a while, and how it comes in waves, the slasher film being popular.
Yes, indeed.
And then that fading away, like the demon phase with The Omen, the Amityville Horror.
Yes.
So horror does come in waves like that. Let's be fair. The found footage documentaries.
Yeah. It's all... They try and find a new way to scare people, and then it's jump on the bandwagon. It's a shame. And they do it just as much with games as they do with movies.
Yeah, and right now we're just in the middle of that zombie phase, but it'll pass and something else terrifying will come through.
Well, I think we're starting to hit, at least in the indie market, we're in the animatronics phase right now.
Yes.
Because of Five Nights, its popularity. And there are tons of Five Nights clones. Tons.
But we've hit on 10 games, discussed why they're frightening. We want to know what frightens you in film and game. Let us know. What are the scariest things you've played? Are there games that you literally could not continue to play because they just scared you too much? Tell us in the comments on the Twitter, the Critical Android, the Gmail address, thecriticalandroid@gmail.com. Fire away emails to us. It's thecriticalandroid@gmail.com. Let myself and the Innkeeper know what's going on. And also, I'll throw a shout out here. Innkeeper, you're still working on your own independent channel coming up,
That's correct. Currently, I'm working on the Innkeeper Gaming. It's an independent channel. I'm going to be handling all sorts of different things, including PC games primarily, and, of course, VR, which I've discussed in the past here. That'll be coming up within the next few months. I've already done some preliminary work. However, I'm still working on some studio space and some other things to try and get things up and running. So feel free to contact me. I am at The Innkeeper Gaming on Facebook. Also, The Innkeeper Gaming at gmail.com.
There you go.
Feel free.
Got to throw a shout out there. Good friends, and we both want the success to happen for both of our channels. And if there's something that the Innkeeper covers that you want to be able to gravitate towards, by all means, throw your support towards him. We want to be able to provide as much content as we can for people who are interested, and that's what we're doing it for.
Indeed, and keep an eye out. I will make an official announcement when everything starts getting up, and I'll be in here with the Android again to say, hey, let's go. And I'll bring the Innkeeper or the Android in on some of the Innkeeper content as well.
Some good things to look forward to. So hopefully you'll enjoy that, and hopefully you enjoyed our discussion here of horror games and why they're frightening. Innkeeper, thank you for joining me here today.
Always a pleasure.
And to everyone else out there, thank you once again for listening. This has been the Critical Android, bringing to you another episode of the Critical Cast. To everyone out there, I wish you a good day and pleasant dreams of electric sheep.